Welcome to Digital Learning, an initiative of Directorate of Collegiate Education, Government of Karnataka. Two Friends, a short story by Gay D. Maupassant, prescribed for second semester BA General English, Bengaluru North University, has been discussed in detail in the previous sessions. After the text, a language activity usually follows. So, the language activity of two friends is the grammar concept called active and passive voice, which shall be discussed here in this present session. I am Nandana NJ, Assistant Professor of English, GFGC, Bagepalli. The contents of the presentation: active and passive voice, recapitulation, followed by multiple choice questions. First, let us try to define what is voice. The voice of a verb tells whether the subject of the sentence performs or receives the action. Simple example is provided here. Birds build nests. Nests are built by birds. Observe, there are two small sentences. In the first one, the focus is on the birds building the nest. That is, the focus is on the person who is doing the action. In the second sentence, nests are built by the birds. In the second sentence, the focus is on the product that has come out through the course of the action. The focus is on the nests which are built by the birds. So, when you look at the picture there, voice is characteristic of verbs which indicate the relation of the verb's action to its subject. The voice of a verb may be either active or passive voice. So, there are two types of voice. Active voice, the subject performs the action expressed by the verb. The usage, when more clarity and straightforward relation is required between verb and subject. So, remember, active voice, the person who is doing the action, the focus is on the person. Such a sentence is known as active voice. Passive voice, the subject receives the action expressed by the verb. When the action is on the focus, not the subject, nor when the doer is unknown. In passive voice, the person who is doing the action becomes secondary. What has it done? That receives more attention. A simple example is provided here. I am sure since your school days you have been looking at this example, but still the same example can be used to show what is the difference between active and passive voice. Remember, there are two types of voices, active and passive voice. In an active voice, it says what the subject does. The focus is on the person who is doing the action. In passive voice, the focus is on the action part, on how the thing is being done. So, in active voice, the sentence can be Ram killed Ravan. Look at the person Ram, he is the one, and what is he doing? He killed Ravan. So, the focus is on Ram killing Ravan. So, it becomes an active voice sentence. When the same is put in passive form, it can be said as Ravan was killed by Ram. The person who was in the primary position in active voice becomes secondary, and the focus is on the action here. So, Ravan becomes important as he was killed by Ram. Again, to reiterate the differences between active voice and passive voice. Active voice, it tells us what a person or a thing does. The subject performs the action on the object. So, you can take the mathematical formula here as subject plus verb plus object, S plus V plus O. Example, Anna painted the house. Anna is the one painting it, so the focus is on the person doing the action. So, the sentence will be constructed as Anna painted the house. The teacher always answers the students' questions. The teacher always answers that action part. She is the one who is answering. So, the focus is on the teacher always answers the students' questions. Ali posted the video online. Who posted it? Ali. As he is doing the action, the focus is on Ali. So, these three are primary examples for active voice. Passive voice, it tells us what is done to someone or something. The subject is being acted upon. Here the formula changes slightly. Object plus verb plus subject. Examples: the house was painted by Anna. Here, the focus is only on the action part or on how the house was painted. The focus is not on Anna who has painted it. That is why it is called as a passive voice. The students' questions are answered by the teacher. The video was posted online by Ali. The rules of conversion from active to passive voice. While converting a sentence from active to passive voice, a few rules should be borne in mind. First, identify the subject, the verb and the object. S plus V plus O. The subject of the active verb becomes the agent of the object. Put the suitable helping verb or auxiliary verb. Change the verb into past participle of the verb. Add the preposition by. Remember, the passive of an active voice is formed by putting the verb to be into the same tense as the active verb and adding the past participle of the active verb. The subject of the active verb becomes the agent of passive verb. The agent is very often not mentioned. When it is mentioned, it is preceded by and placed at the end of the clause. Observe the sentence. This tree was planted by my grandmother. Some more examples are provided. Example, active voice. Samir wrote a letter. If you divide this sentence, Samir is the subject and the verb is wrote. And what did he write? A letter. That becomes the object. So this is how a sentence has to be divided along the lines of subject, verb, object. This is in active voice. When you put it in passive voice, a letter was written by Samir. Now this can be divided into a letter is an object. Auxiliary verb is was, written, past participle, by. The by word is added. So remember, wherever the word by is there in a sentence, more or less it is a passive voice. And by whom was it written? Samir. The person who takes all the attention in active voice becomes secondary in the passive voice. Now let us observe a few sentences. Passive voice for all tenses. Simple present tense. In active voice, the sentence is she writes a letter, while in passive voice it is a letter is written by her. Present progressive tense. Active voice, they are eating oranges. In passive voice, in passive voice, oranges are being eaten by them. Present perfect tense. Active voice, has she completed the work? Passive voice, has the work been completed by them? Simple past tense. Active voice, he did not buy a book. Passive voice, a book was not bought by him. Past progressive tense. Active voice, she was washing a shirt. Passive voice, a shirt was being washed by her. Past perfect tense. Active voice, they had won the match. Passive voice, the match had been won by them. Simple future tense. Active voice, she will write a poem. Passive voice, a poem will be written by her. Future perfect tense. Active voice, he will have received the letter. Passive voice, the letter will have been received by him. Note, the sentences of the following tenses can't be changed to passive voice. Present perfect continuous or progressive tense, past perfect continuous or progressive tense, future perfect continuous or progressive tense, future continuous or progressive tense, sentences having intransitive verbs. A few tips on using voice. The word let. If the given sentence in the active voice is in the imperative form, to get the passive voice, use let. Formation of a passive voice is equal to let plus object plus be plus past participle. Examples, in active voice, if the sentence is help me, in passive it can be said as let me be helped. Open the door, let the door be opened. Helping verbs like am, is, are, was, were, will, have, should, could, will. If the question is in the active voice and it begins with a helping verb, then the passive voice must also begin with a suitable helping verb. Are you writing a letter? Is a letter being written by you? Will you write a letter? Will a letter be written by you? What, when, who, why, how. If the question begins with WH or how form, what, when, how, etc., the passive voice also must begin with the same. Only who gets replaced by whom. The rest remain the same. Why did you break the box? Why was the box broken by you? Who broke the window? By whom was the window broken? Gerund or infinitive. When used in passive form, gerund and infinitive are formed differently. Infinitive, passive is formed as to be plus past participle. I want to shoot the tiger. I want the tiger to be shot. Gerund, passive is formed as being plus past participle. I remember my father taking me to the theatre. I remember being taken to the theatre by my father. Direct and indirect object. If a sentence contains two objects, namely indirect object and direct object in the active voice, two forms of passive voice can be formed. If the sentence in the active form is she brought me a cup of coffee, then two forms of passive voice can be written. In the first form, I was brought a cup of coffee by her, and in the second, a cup of coffee was brought to me by her. Object complement. When made passive, these objects complement become subject complements. They come after the verb. They elected him their leader. He was elected their leader. Cases where by is not used with. Use with in place of by to talk about an instrument used by the agent or subject. Active voice. Somebody hit the dog with a stick. So the two forms of passive voice are the dog was hit by with a stick. The dog was hit by a boy. Impersonal passive. In scientific, technical, business writing, the emphasis is usually on the action or process, so the by phrase is generally omitted. Active voice. One finds mosquitoes everywhere. Passive. Mosquitoes are found everywhere. Here, by is not required. Cases where no passive form exists. Present perfect continuous. She has been writing a letter. Past perfect continuous. He had been cleaning the house. Future continuous. I will be filing all the documents tomorrow. Future perfect continuous. I will have been serving tea for customers at this hotel for 20 years by then. Intransitive verb which do not take objects. There are a few verbs which do not take any object for that matter. For example, I eat, I am living here, I have travelled by train, I went there, I waited for a long time. Let us try to recapitulate what we have learned through the course of this session. What is a voice? The voice of a verb tells whether the subject of the sentence performs or receives the action. The two types of voice are active voice and passive voice, and we also discussed in detail the rules of conversion from active to passive voice, and also we tried to look at some tips on how to use a voice. We also saw the few exemption circumstances there. Multiple choice question. There are dash types of voice in English grammar: 5, 2, 8 or 10. In the very beginning of the introduction, I told you how many types of voice are there in English, and the answer is option B, 2. There are two types of voice in English grammar. The voice of a dash tells whether the subject of the sentence performs or receives the action. Now this is very important. The options provided are verb, noun, pronoun or adjective, and the answer is option A, verb. The voice of a verb tells whether the subject of the sentence performs or receives the action. In fact, we can say that verb is the most important figure of speech. Without verb, the entire sentence might fall short. The two types of voice are noun and pronoun, verb and adverb, adjective and adverb, or active and passive voice. The two types of voice are active voice and passive voice. A sentence is provided here. Identify the voice in the sentence. Observe the sentence. Tom painted the entire house. If you recollect, in active voice, the focus is on the person doing the action. Now do observe the sentence. Tom painted the entire house. So who is Tom? Tom is the one painting the entire house. So the focus is on the person doing the action. And what did he paint? The entire house. So the answer is active voice. The options provided are passive voice, redundant, continuous or active voice. The answer is active as Tom painted. The focus is on the action. Tom painted the entire house. Identify the voice in the sentence. The flat tire was changed by Sue. The first prominent clue here is the word by. As I have told you before, if the sentence by is there and is followed by a subject, more or less it is a passive voice. So the options provided are passive, redundant, continuous or active. The flat tire was changed by Sue. So the focus here is on the action of the flat tire being changed. And who did the change there? It was Sue. But Sue comes at the end. The focus is on the action part. So the answer is option A, passive voice. The references used for the presentation: